3 seconds was all Karen McCarthy needed to decide that Natalie Cole didn't belong in the first-class lounge. The luxurious suit and confident, dignified demeanor meant nothing to Karen. All she saw was the color of Natalie's skin. "Security," Karen hissed, narrowing her eyes with the familiar suspicion. What Karen couldn't see was the empire Natalie had built from scratch, the billions of dollars in her hands, and the steely resolve honed over a lifetime of fighting against prejudice. As the security guard escorted Natalie out, the other passengers averted their gazes, except for young intern Jamal Barnes, who immediately recognized the renowned tech CEO. Natalie's face revealed no emotion as she calmly made a single phone call. Activate Protocol Raven. Initiate full surveillance mode. With those few quiet words, the fate of Regalis Airways was sealed. Karen thought she had just removed an undeserving passenger, but instead, she had ignited a battle with a woman who had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. A moment when injustice would face unstoppable power, sharp strategy, and unyielding justice. That morning at Washington National Airport, the sunlight glistened off a sleek black Bentley that had just arrived at the domestic terminal. The car door opened smoothly, and Natalie Cole stepped out, immediately drawing the gaze of every person around her. Natalie Cole, the powerful CEO of Cole Dynamics, was not only famous for her wealth and influence, but also for her commanding, dignified presence that earned the respect of many. She adjusted the button on her elegant Armani jacket, walking with grace and purpose. Despite her seemingly natural, gentle demeanor, her eyes held an incredible sharpness and strength. "Miss Cole, would you like me to take your luggage?" James, the personal driver, asked as he bowed his head. "No need, James. I only have carry-on today," Natalie replied with a gentle smile. "Go ahead and take the day off. I'll call you when I get to San Francisco." "Thank you, Miss Cole," James said politely, bowing his head before leaving. As she entered the main terminal, Natalie could feel something all too familiar, the skeptical and judgmental looks all around. As a successful black woman in a world filled with prejudice, Natalie had long known that every time she stepped into a high-end space, she had to brace herself for these doubtful stares. After quickly passing through security, Natalie calmly walked toward the first-class lounge of Regalis Airways. The woman at the counter, Karen McCarthy, was deep in conversation with a colleague when she suddenly stopped, looked up at Natalie, and scrutinized her with clear suspicion. "Good morning," Natalie said calmly, handing over her boarding pass and platinum membership card. "I have a flight to San Francisco at 11:30. Karen slowly took the documents, her gaze filled with doubt and wariness. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Karen asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm, her eyes scanning Natalie from head to toe. "I'm sure," Natalie replied calmly, her voice steady but firm. Karen glanced at her colleague, lowering her voice just enough for Natalie to hear. "Probably a ticket someone else bought for her. Can someone like her really be flying first class?" Natalie heard every word, but her face betrayed no emotion. Her heart ached briefly. How many times had she heard similar words, cold judgments based solely on the color of her skin? "What's the problem?" Natalie asked, her tone calm yet resolute. Karen smirked and then turned back with a stern expression. "I'm sorry, but I'll have to check the information. It's company policy, you understand." With that, Karen picked up the phone and called security, reporting a suspicious passenger. Within minutes, 2 large security guards appeared and approached Natalie, drawing the curious, murmuring stares of those around them. "Sorry, we've been informed that you're not eligible to use this lounge. Please come with us," one said sternly. Natalie didn't argue. She knew a painful truth. Any strong reaction here would turn her into the angry black woman. Instead, she simply smiled politely, stood up with calm composure, and left the lounge amidst the whispers of the crowd. Once outside the lounge area, Natalie stopped, calmly took her phone from her jacket pocket, her eyes briefly flashing with a cold, sharp gleam, though her voice remained quiet and chilling. Protocol, Raven. Activate full surveillance and comprehensive deployment. Understood, came the clear voice of Leah Jackson, head of security for Cole Dynamics, on the other end. This wasn't the first time Natalie had faced this. But this time would be different. This time, they weren't just discriminating against an individual. They were insulting an entire community, challenging the pride and dignity of a woman who had spent her life fighting to rise from poverty and prejudice. Natalie ended the call, her gaze turning to the airport's glass doors, the airplanes gleaming under the sunlight. Regalis Airways had chosen the wrong target. Natalie didn't like conflict, but she wouldn't hesitate to fight when cornered. This time, she would show Regalis Airways the true power of the woman they dared to underestimate. The war had only just begun. The plane lifted off the runway, and Natalie leaned her head back against the seat, gently closing her eyes. Everything that had just happened was still deeply imprinted in her mind, so clear that each word, each suspicious glance seemed to surround her, awakening memories from a time she had always tried to bury deep within her heart. In an instant, before Natalie, there was no longer the luxurious airplane cabin or the discrimination of people like Karen McCarthy. Instead, she seemed to be back in a small, cold house deep within the impoverished slums of Chicago's outskirts, where she had spent her lonely, unfortunate childhood. She could clearly recall that fateful day, when she was just 6 years old, when 2 police officers appeared at the door, their faces cold and stern. Little Natalie stood behind her aunt, confused, quietly listening as they told her that her parents had died in a car accident. Natalie was too young to fully understand the magnitude of the loss, but enough to know that from that day on, her life would never be the same. From that moment on, Natalie's life became a long string of days spent bouncing between different foster homes. Some were kind, but most were cold, where she often became the target of mockery, bullying, and discrimination just because of her skin color and her circumstances. The harsh words she overheard then were just like Karen's tone this morning. People like her will never get anywhere. She'll never escape this slum. But even in those darkest moments, Natalie found a way out: mathematics and programming. An old math book she found in the school library, a second-hand computer gifted by a sympathetic middle school teacher. These became Natalie's lifeline, pulling her away from the grim reality. Every night, while everyone else slept, young Natalie sat under the pale yellow light, hunched over her old computer, writing lines of code or poring over pages of complicated math books far beyond her age. Those numbers and symbols weren't just equations to Natalie. They were hope for a different life. She realized that if she could solve those complex problems, she could decode the harsh world around her. But not everyone saw that effort. Natalie still remembered her classmate Jessica from middle school, the daughter of a wealthy family who always looked down on and mocked her for years. Why bother trying, Natalie? People like you will always be on the outside. Math isn't for people like you. Back then, Natalie stayed silent. She understood the power of silence. It wasn't surrender, it was focus. It was that focus that quietly allowed her to rise, leaving behind those who ridiculed and belittled her. At 17, Natalie's efforts were finally rewarded when she received a full scholarship to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. That was the day she cried tears of joy for the first time in her life. The dream of an orphaned girl from a slum filled with injustice had now opened a new door. Natalie knew exactly what she had to do: use her intellect to create change, not just for herself, but for others who suffered the same injustices she once did. Those memories now appeared as clear as if they had happened just yesterday. Natalie opened her eyes and looked out the airplane window. The clear blue sky stretched out before her, a testament to how far she had come. Yet, despite her incredible success, the past and the ghosts of injustice still followed her, never fully letting go. The only difference now was that she was no longer the powerless little girl of the past. The Natalie Cole of today had enough power, strength, and intellect to stand against people like Karen McCarthy and the prejudices that still linger in society. In front of her, the phone screen lit up with a message from Leah. Protocol Raven has been deployed. The first documents on Regalis Airways are quite telling. Awaiting your next instructions. Natalie gently set the phone down, a slight smile crossing her face, confident yet filled with determination. The ghosts of the past no longer frightened her. Instead, they reminded her that this fight wasn't personal. It was a battle for all those who had suffered the same injustices she had. Now, Natalie not only wanted to change her own life, but also to change an entire unjust system that still persistently existed in society. And for this fight, she was ready. The sound of the plane touching down gently pulled Natalie from her thoughts. As soon as the airplane door opened, she quickly stepped out, heading straight for the sleek black car waiting for her. The car door shut behind her, and it was then that Natalie took out her phone, her face stern, her eyes filled with strong determination. She dialed a familiar number. After a short ring, Leah Jackson's decisive voice came through on the other end. Cole Dynamics, Leah speaking. Leah, I need you to elevate Protocol Raven to the highest level immediately, Natalie said softly, but firmly. Understood, Natalie. All of Regalis Airways' files have been under analysis since you left Washington. We've already uncovered several key points, particularly suspicious financial activities and a history of lawsuits related to racial discrimination. It seems Regalis is not as clean as their shiny exterior would suggest. Natalie nodded silently, though Leah couldn't see. Leah Jackson wasn't just her head of security. She was a former senior CIA agent who had been with Natalie since the early days of her struggling startup. Natalie had absolute trust in Leah's analytical skills and ability to handle tough situations. Good work, Leah, Natalie continued. Prioritize CEO Charles Whitmore and Regalis internal security systems. We need to land a precise blow to their weakest point. I got it. Oh, and one more thing, Natalie. A young intern at the airport, Jamal Barnes, reached out to us. He said he witnessed the entire incident between you and Karen McCarthy. Jamal is furious and wants to support us in the investigation. Natalie was momentarily surprised, but quickly regained her composure. She recalled seeing a young man standing nearby when she was escorted out of the lounge. At that moment, she had noticed the anger and frustration in his eyes. Is he trustworthy? Natalie asked cautiously. Leah chuckled softly. We've done a preliminary check. Jamal is a senior IT student at Howard University and has been interning at Regalis Airways for nearly 6 months. His record is clean, and both his parents were active in civil rights movements in Washington. Personally, I find him very reliable. Natalie was silent for a moment, then quickly decided, all right. Arrange a meeting with Jamal as soon as possible. If he can really help us from the inside, it will be a huge advantage. Understood. I'll handle it right away, Leah responded decisively. Natalie ended the call, her gaze drifting toward the city sinking into the twilight. She knew she had just kicked off a difficult battle, but this time she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, at Washington Airport, Jamal Barnes was still seething with anger over what he had just witnessed. His furious face was reflected clearly on his phone screen as he texted his close friend Derek Wells, a young engineer working in the IT department at Regalis Airways. "You won't believe what I just saw, Derek." Karen was openly racist again. She kicked Natalie Cole out of the first-class lounge, even though all her documents were completely in order. This isn't the first time Karen has done this. Just a few seconds later, Derek replied, "Do you have any clear evidence?" Regalis always tries to protect people like Karen. Without solid proof, this could be tough. Jamal took a deep breath, remembering Natalie's composed, dignified expression as she was forced out of the lounge. He quickly typed, "I know what I need to do now. I'm going to contact Cole Dynamics directly to make this clear. Natalie Cole is not someone who lets things slide." "Be careful, Jamal. You know Karen has close ties with CEO Charles Whitmore. If she finds out you're behind this, your position at Regalis will be affected immediately," Derek warned. Jamal hesitated for a second, then typed resolutely, "There are things more important than this internship, Derek. I can't stand by and watch people like Karen continue to hurt others. I'm going to help Natalie bring this to light." Jamal sent the message and leaned back in his chair, his heart racing, but for the first time he felt more determined than ever. He thought of his parents, who had spent their lives fighting for equality, and realized this was the moment he could not remain silent. In the skies over San Francisco, the car carrying Natalie Cole slowly made its way toward the city center. The bright lights of the city had already started to glow, signaling that a new battle had just been activated. Natalie now not only had the power of wealth and intellect in her hands, but she also had the support of passionate, courageous individuals like Jamal. The counteroffensive had begun, and this time, those who underestimated Natalie Cole and people like her would pay a heavy price. While Natalie was systematically launching her counteroffensive, a quiet storm began to spread through the ranks of Regalis Airways. The first news of the incident at Washington National Airport quickly surfaced on social media, drawing widespread attention from the public. On the 35th floor of the Regalis Airways building in Atlanta, the CEO's office was bathed in the soft light of expensive desk lamps. Charles Whitmore, the esteemed CEO of the airline, sat silently in his luxurious leather chair, his eyes fixed on the large television screen mounted on the wall. The CNN News Channel was airing a short video of Natalie Cole being escorted out of the first-class lounge, with a large, attention-grabbing headline, "Powerful CEO Natalie Cole discriminated against by Regalis Airways?" Charles smirked, shaking his head in contempt, then turned to Ethan Ross, the sharp, wiry man seated opposite him. Ethan Ross was not only renowned as the best crisis manager in the aviation industry, but also infamous for his ruthlessness and cold efficiency when dealing with sensitive issues for corporate leaders. "What do you think of this, Ethan?" Charles asked, his voice calm, as if it were just a minor annoyance. Ethan looked directly into Charles's eyes, his voice as sharp as a knife. "Nothing special. Just a woman trying to stir trouble. But this time, that woman is Natalie Cole, a very big name, Charles. We can't afford to take this lightly." Charles waved his hand dismissively, laughing derisively. "So, what if it's Natalie Cole? Does she think that just because she has money and some power she can change anything? I won't let her harm this airline's reputation. You handle it, Ethan. You have full authority." Ethan nodded, stood up, and left the room without saying another word. He knew very well that when Charles Whitmore delegated a task, failure was not an option, no matter the methods required. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency meeting in the conference room on the 30th floor. As soon as Ethan walked into the room, The air grew thick with tension. The senior staff at the airport sat in silence, none of them daring to make eye contact with Ethan, all of them fully aware of the kind of man he was. "Does anyone want to explain to me what happened with Natalie Cole?" Ethan asked, his tone devoid of any emotion. The room fell into silence for a few seconds, until Karen McCarthy reluctantly spoke, her voice trembling. "She didn't seem like a first-class passenger. I was just following the procedure." Ethan looked at Karen with an icy cold gaze, which silenced her immediately. "You've just brought us face to face with a major media crisis. Don't try to justify your mistake," Ethan said slowly but sharply. "Are you ready to leave your position, Karen?" Karen went pale, unable to utter a word. Ethan stood up, walked toward the large window overlooking the city below, and his voice rang out sharply in the meeting room. "Everyone in this room, listen carefully. From now on, anyone who speaks to the press or to Cole Dynamics about internal matters, I will ensure that person will never work in the aviation industry again." A suffocating silence filled the room. No one dared object. Everyone knew Ethan Ross didn't speak empty words. In the past, many had lost their jobs, their dignity, because they defied him. Ethan looked around the room, his voice growing colder. "I want every staff member's messages, emails, and calls to be monitored. Find anyone who seems to be supporting Natalie Cole, even the smallest people like interns or tech staff. And I need you all to pay particular attention to one name, Jamal Barnes. According to internal sources, he seems very involved in this matter. I want to know exactly how he's connected." As the meeting concluded, the staff left the room in heavy silence. Karen lingered, approaching Ethan with a trembling voice. "Ethan, please help me. I was just doing what the company implicitly encouraged. I don't deserve to lose everything over this." Ethan looked at Karen coldly, a faint smirk appearing on his lips. "Karen, you're the one who created this problem, so you should understand that you're the best solution to get Regalis through this. A scapegoat is sometimes necessary. Be prepared." Karen froze, her face pale with fear, as Ethan walked past her without saying another word. On the top floor, Charles Whitmore was still leisurely enjoying a glass of expensive whiskey, completely unaware that the storm he had just triggered would not be as easy to control as he thought. Beneath the sparkling lights of Regalis Airways, the undercurrent of rebellion had quietly begun to rise. Charles and Ethan had misjudged their opponent. Natalie Cole was no ordinary woman. This battle, they would soon realize, would come with a heavy price for their arrogance and contempt for others. While Charles Whitmore sat comfortably in his luxurious office, confident that everything would soon blow over, on the other side of the country, Leah Jackson and Natalie Cole's task force had quietly infiltrated the Regalis Airways data system, step by step uncovering horrific secrets that Charles had never imagined would come to light. For an entire week, Leah's operations room at Cole Dynamics remained lit up through the night. Dozens of computer screens continuously displayed data, charts, and a slew of complex financial records. Leah stood in the center of the room, intensely focused on the information before her, her expression growing more serious by the minute. "Leah, you need to see this right now." A young staff member rushed over, handing Leah a printed file. Leah quickly skimmed through the first few lines, her eyes growing colder. Fake maintenance records on the entire Boeing 737 fleet for 6 consecutive years. Leah frowned, muttering loud enough for the entire room to hear. "They've been disregarding the safety of thousands of passengers every day just to save a few $1,000,000 a year." "That's not all," the assistant continued. We've also discovered internal emails clearly proving that Regalis Airways has been systematically avoiding hiring people of color for senior management positions for almost a decade. These candidates were even deliberately rated lower in interviews to ensure they could never reach important roles. Leah sighed and placed the file down on the desk, her face turning grim. We're dealing with a company that is not only unethical, but flagrantly breaking the law. At that moment, Leah's phone rang, displaying Natalie Cole's name. Leah picked up immediately. "Natalie, we've uncovered some serious issues. Not only the fake maintenance records and racial discrimination in hiring, but also an international money laundering ring connected to Regalis charter. Charles and the leadership have been using this system to funnel illegal money through foreign accounts for years." There was a brief silence on the other end, then Natalie responded calmly. "Leah, are you certain we have enough concrete evidence to make all of this public before the media?" "I've thoroughly confirmed it, Natalie. We have undeniable evidence, and no lawyer will be able to deny it," Leah assured confidently. "Good. It's time to act more aggressively," Natalie said. "Prepare an emergency press conference for tomorrow. Regalis Airways won't be able to escape the light of justice any longer." The next morning, Regalis Airways headquarters was plunged into chaos as major news outlets simultaneously broadcast shocking headlines. Regalis Airways accused of falsifying aircraft maintenance records for years. Regalis hiring scandal, systematic racial discrimination. CEO Charles Whitmore and top executives under investigation for international money laundering. The news quickly spread nationwide, causing a media earthquake that sent Regalis Airways stock prices plummeting. In the CEO's office, Charles Whitmore stood frozen before the TV screen, his face pale with anger and fear. "What the hell is going on?" Charles roared, throwing his glass of whiskey onto the floor, shattering it into pieces. Ethan Ross stood beside him, his face as cold as ever, but for the first time he couldn't hide his own tension. "Charles, they've got more than we anticipated. I warned you from the start that Natalie Cole wasn't as simple as she appeared, but you underestimated her," Ethan said, his voice tight with frustration. Charles trembled as he looked at Ethan, his eyes filled with rage. "Are you implying you have nothing to do with this? Didn't you assure me everything would be handled? I gave you full authority to make sure this wouldn't happen." Ethan responded coolly, unfazed. "I've done everything necessary to prevent internal leaks, but Natalie Cole clearly has a much stronger intelligence network than we expected. There's also an insider within Regalis Airways. I'll find them, but for now, we need to handle this media storm." Charles clutched his head, sinking into his chair, his face showing clear signs of helplessness. "What are you going to do to fix this, Ethan?" Ethan paused for a moment, then spoke in a chilling tone. "For now, we need someone to take the fall. Karen McCarthy is the obvious choice. Meanwhile, I'll try to shift public attention to lower-level employees until the situation dies down. After that, we'll focus on restoring your and the leadership's reputation." Charles looked at Ethan with weary skepticism, but reluctantly nodded. Deep down, he knew Natalie Cole had truly pushed him into a corner. Ethan left the room, his mind already planning how to track down the mole, while Charles sat in growing panic. Outside, the media continued to release more shocking evidence. From Leah's office at Cole Dynamics, Natalie stood by the window, looking out with a calm yet serious expression. She was all too familiar with injustice, but this time she would make sure that justice would be fully served. Regalis Airways was slowly crumbling under the pressure of the truth, and Natalie Cole knew full well that this was only the beginning of a fierce battle she had long been ready to fight. As the explosive news about Regalis Airways' misconduct spread rapidly, Ethan Ross realized that the situation was spiraling out of control. He knew that he couldn't stand by and watch the reputation of Charles Whitmore and the airline crumble any further. Ethan decided that the only way forward was to shift the public narrative, and his target was Natalie Cole. With a determined mindset, Ethan sat down at his desk in a secluded office, carefully accessing the internal network. He quickly sent an encrypted message to a trusted contact in the media. "I need you to spread some rumors that will cause the public to question Natalie Cole's motives. Build a story around the idea that she's deliberately attacking Regalis Airways to divert attention from some tax fraud and social responsibility avoidance issues that Cole Dynamics has been involved in." The response came swiftly. "Do you have enough evidence to back this up?" Ethan smirked coldly, his fingers swiftly moving across the keyboard. "Just planting doubts in the public's mind is enough. We don't need solid proof, just enough smoke to make the public believe there's fire. The rest, I'll take care of." Little did Ethan know, each of the messages he exchanged was clearly visible on the large screen in Leah Jackson's operations room at Cole Dynamics. Leah stood with her arms crossed, her eyes scanning each word Ethan had sent, her gaze filled with cold disdain. "Ethan Ross, did you really think we wouldn't foresee this lowly scheme?" A staff member quickly recorded the data and confirmed with Leah. "We've already blocked this rumor early on. All the links Ethan sent have been neutralized, and the cybersecurity team has set up barriers. You can rest easy, Miss Leah." "Good," Leah nodded in satisfaction. "At the same time, send all the evidence we've gathered about Ethan's messages to the FBI immediately. We need to ensure he faces the consequences of this dirty action." Just a few hours later, as Ethan was preparing to leave the Regalis Airways office, his phone began to buzz incessantly with urgent messages. He opened his phone, his eyes widening in horror as he saw the messages he had sent earlier that morning being plastered across news broadcasts, along with even more shocking information. "FBI launches investigation into Ethan Ross and Regalis Airways for plot to spread false information to smear CEO Natalie Cole." Ethan stood frozen, his body chilled. Before he could gather his thoughts, his desk phone rang violently. Reluctantly, he picked it up, his voice trembling. "Who is this?" The cold voice on the other end replied firmly, "Agent William Harper, FBI. Ethan Ross, we need you at the FBI office right now to answer some questions related to your involvement in spreading false information." Ethan stood motionless for a few seconds, his usual confidence completely evaporating. He tried to steady himself, but the rising fear in his chest was undeniable. I need to speak to my lawyer before I cooperate with you," Ethan weakly protested. "Of course." Agent Harper's voice remained resolute. "But I suggest you don't delay too long. This time, Ethan, the evidence is not on your side." Hanging up, Ethan felt a cold chill in his limbs, knowing deep down that everything was over. His once perfect plan had turned into a double-edged sword, now turning back to strike him. Meanwhile, in the luxurious office of Charles Whitmore, the situation was no better. Charles's face turned pale as he slammed his hand on the desk after hearing that Ethan was under FBI investigation. "How could Ethan be so careless?" Charles shouted, his voice full of fury, as his assistant nervously stood before him. "Sir, from what we know, Cole Dynamics has known about Ethan's plan from the start. It seems they've been monitoring our every move," the assistant responded cautiously. Charles growled in rage. "Natalie Cole? Is she trying to force me into a corner? I can't let this happen." The assistant hesitated and stepped forward, speaking softly but with concern. "Sir, the FBI has already begun their investigation. Perhaps we should consider another solution. Fighting this only makes things worse." Charles stared blankly ahead, a rare look of desperation flashing in his eyes. Finally, he spoke in a dry, weak voice, much softer than before. "Call my lawyer immediately and prepare to notify the board of directors. We need to do something to save the company." On the other side of the country, in Cole Dynamics' office, Leah and Natalie stood side by side, looking out over the city bathed in the fiery glow of the setting sun. "We're on the right track this time, Leah. But the battle isn't over," Natalie said softly, yet with immense power. Leah nodded, her face more determined than ever. "Regalis Airways will pay for what they've done, Natalie. Justice is finally closing in." Natalie smiled faintly, her eyes gazing into the vast horizon outside the window. She knew that this fight would continue, but for the first time in a long time, she could clearly feel the victory in her grasp. The most intense confrontation had begun, but this time, justice and truth stood firmly on Natalie Cole's side. As the news of Ethan Ross being investigated by the FBI still rippled through the media, a new scandal emerged, this time centered around Karen McCarthy. Security footage from the airport, released by Leah Jackson's team, quickly went viral. Millions of viewers were exposed to Karen's blatant and systematic racist behavior during her time at Regalis Airways. In the most prominent video, Karen repeatedly refused to check the documents of a black family, despite them having valid first-class tickets. She loudly criticized and made disparaging remarks, openly showing her prejudice. "I know people like you. You think having a little bit of money entitles you to first class. I'm not letting anyone exploit this airline." As this video was widely broadcast, public outrage exploded. Small protests appeared outside Regalis Airways headquarters, and a flood of calls and complaints inundated the airline system, forcing the leadership to call an emergency meeting. The boardroom was thick with tension. Charles Whitmore sat in silence, his face pale from stress, while the other board members argued heatedly. "Karen McCarthy must be held accountable. She's made us a target of worldwide condemnation," one board member shouted. "But she's just an employee. How can we put all the blame on Karen alone? We need to handle this more carefully." Another board member tried to stay calm. Charles raised his hand for silence. He spoke slowly, his words sounding reluctant, as though he had made a painful decision. "There's no other option. Karen McCarthy must be fired immediately and publicly. We need to show the public that Regalis Airways will not tolerate racism." That very afternoon, Karen was urgently called to the airport management office. She walked into the room with her usual arrogant demeanor but quickly realized something was different. "Karen, based on clear evidence from the security cameras and multiple passenger complaints, we are forced to inform you that you will be terminated immediately," the HR director declared coldly. Karen's face turned white as a sheet, her anger flaring as she slammed her hands down on the table. "You can't do this to me. Everything I did was in line with the company's unwritten policies. You've always encouraged this behavior, and now you're making me the scapegoat?" The HR director remained unfazed, responding calmly. "This decision is final, Karen. We've already faced enough consequences for your actions." Leaving the office with eyes red from anger, Karen immediately called her personal lawyer and declared her intent to sue Regalis Airways. Within days, her lawsuit went public, sparking a highly charged and scandalous legal battle. Surrounded by a throng of reporters, Karen defiantly spoke out. "I am just a victim of a deeply racist system at Regalis Airways. It's the senior leadership, including CEO Charles Whitmore, who have tacitly supported my actions for years." The media war quickly shifted direction as the public began to question. Was Karen just an individual acting on her own, or was she simply carrying out the company's unspoken policies that Regalis Airways had never officially acknowledged? This high-profile lawsuit dealt yet another crushing blow to Regalis Airways' already tarnished reputation. Charles Whitmore fell deeper into despair as each day passed. More of the airline's dark secrets were being exposed. Meanwhile, at Cole Dynamics, Leah Jackson and Natalie Cole stood before the large screen, watching Karen's lawsuit unfold. Leah spoke thoughtfully. "Karen is digging her own grave, but at the same time, she's dragging Regalis Airways down with her." Natalie nodded gently, her eyes distant, yet her voice firm. "This is just the first step. Karen may be a small pawn, but she'll help us reveal the entire rotten system inside Regalis. I want it all to come to light." Leah smiled, feeling a slight sense of relief for the first time in many days of tension. "This fight won't be easy, Natalie, but I think this time we really do have victory in our grasp." Outside the window, the last rays of the day's sunlight began to fade into the horizon, signaling that night was approaching. But for Natalie, this night no longer represented despair or injustice. It was the moment just before the dawn, the time when the light of justice would shine through, exposing all the crimes that had been hidden for too long. As Karen McCarthy's lawsuit continued to stir public outrage, Natalie Cole decided this was the perfect time to deliver a decisive blow to Regalis Airways. From her expansive office, Natalie stared at the large screen ahead, displaying a series of undeniable pieces of evidence exposing Regalis's severe wrongdoing. From fake aircraft maintenance contracts, racially discriminatory hiring emails, to suspicious money transfers through multiple foreign accounts. Beside her, Leah Jackson maintained her usual calm demeanor, her voice steady and resolute. "All the evidence is ready, Natalie. The press and major media outlets are just waiting for your green light to publish it all at once." Natalie took a deep breath, looking directly at Leah and giving a slight nod. "Proceed, Leah. It's time for the world to see what Regalis Airways truly is." Just hours later, the entire media landscape in the U.S. simultaneously released a barrage of articles and reports with sharp evidence, exposing the terrifying truth behind the glittering facade of Regalis Airways. CNN led the charge with a bombshell headline, "Shockwave. Regalis Airways linked to corruption scandal, racial discrimination, and international money laundering." Next, NBC and the New York Times followed up with in-depth investigative reports, complete with call recordings, secret emails, and internal documents that clearly showed CEO Charles Whitmore and the leadership condoning a deliberately unjust system. Within just a few hours, the media crisis exploded so violently that even the financial markets reacted. Regalis Airways stock prices plummeted uncontrollably, dropping nearly 40% in a single trading session, wiping out billions of dollars in market value in the blink of an eye. At Regalis Airways headquarters, Charles Whitmore trembled as he stared at the red-hot stock screen, his mind spinning. His assistant rushed in, panic evident in their voice. "Mr. Whitmore, major shareholders are calling constantly, demanding an explanation. There are even signs that the FBI will begin a full investigation into the leadership." Charles froze, sweat dripping from his forehead, the air around him feeling suffocating. For the first time in his life, the man who had dismissed every risk now realized he had completely lost. "Prepare my private jet immediately," Charles suddenly said, his voice shaky with panic. "I need to leave the U.S. before the FBI gets here." The assistant hesitated, shaking their head. "Sir, I'm afraid that's impossible. The FBI has just issued an exit ban on you and the entire senior leadership." The words hit Charles like a thunderbolt, and his face turned ashen. He stood up abruptly, stumbling as he searched for his phone, trying to contact his lawyers and political allies, but everyone he called refused to help, one by one, turning their backs on him as the media storm raged on. At the same time, in Cole Dynamics' office, Natalie closely monitored each development on the large screen before her. She didn't take any joy in the collapse of a major company, but she knew this was the price Regalis Airways had to pay for the series of mistakes and injustices they had caused over the years. "Natalie, the shareholders of Regalis Airways are trying to contact us directly." Leah walked into the room to report. "It seems they want to negotiate an emergency solution to avoid total bankruptcy." Natalie looked at Leah thoughtfully before answering gently, "Arrange a meeting as soon as possible. But this time, they need to understand that we're not just seeking a simple business deal. What I want is a complete change in their management and corporate culture. If they don't commit to that, we won't back down." Leah nodded, her eyes shining with intense belief. "They'll have to understand, Natalie. Regalis Airways has realized they can't escape responsibility anymore. Charles Whitmore has already been cornered by you." Natalie stood up and walked over to the window, looking down at the streets below. The sunset cast bright orange and red streaks across the sky, reflecting on the distant skyscraper. She spoke softly, her voice calm but determined. "All that I'm doing isn't because I hate them, Leah. I'm doing this for those who've suffered injustice for too long, for those who've been forgotten and neglected by the indifference of big corporations. Today is the day that people like us stand up and say the world must change." Outside, the city lights began to twinkle one by one, and Natalie knew that this was the most pivotal moment in the battle she had chosen. There was no doubt left. The media war today would be the turning point that would permanently alter the fate of Regalis Airways, and it would also serve as a powerful affirmation of the strength of truth and justice. As Natalie Cole continued to reveal the truth, Regalis Airways CEO Charles Whitmore grew increasingly desperate. He knew time was running out, the evidence was mounting, and the FBI's tightening grip was imminent. Charles needed someone to take the fall entirely, and he quickly chose his target. Victor Grant, the airport security chief, a former decorated Air Force officer known for his integrity. That evening, in the secluded meeting room deep within the executive office, Charles summoned a few remaining loyal members. The dim light illuminated the tense faces of the senior leaders. Charles glanced around the room and lowered his voice with a cunning tone. "We have no other choice. I've spoken with the top lawyers, and they all agree that Victor Grant is the most suitable person to take the responsibility. He was the head of airport security, and all the safety issues and fake maintenance records fall under his jurisdiction. If we can make it clear that all of this was orchestrated by him, we'll have time to turn the situation around." One of the executives spoke cautiously. "But, Mr. Whitmore, Victor is a retired Air Force officer with a great reputation, and he has always worked with the utmost integrity. I fear this won't be as easy as you think." Charles slammed his hand down on the table in anger. Exactly because of his high reputation, the public will easily believe that he's behind everything. Think about it. We need a clear face to blame, and Victor Grant is the perfect name. This is my order." No one dared to speak further. The room was thick with a heavy silence, and everyone understood they were walking down a path with no way out. Just one day later, Victor Grant was shocked to receive an official notification from Regalis Airways management that he had been immediately suspended and was under investigation for serious violations related to safety and maintenance. Stunned by the unfounded accusations, Victor quickly sought to meet with Charles to clarify. But when he entered Charles's office, the cold gaze and disdainful tone of Charles shattered any hope left in him. "Sorry, Victor, but you understand this is the only way to protect the company. Think of it as a necessary sacrifice." Victor looked at Charles, his eyes filled with a deep sense of anger and disappointment for the first time. "I served this country for over 20 years, always placing integrity and honor above all else. Do you really think I'll easily accept being a scapegoat for your and your greedy leadership's mistakes?" Charles smiled arrogantly. "You have no choice, Victor. If you oppose us, we'll ensure you lose everything. You'll have no reputation left. I suggest you stay silent to preserve what little honor you have left." Victor stood in silence for a long while, meeting Charles' gaze with contempt. Then he turned and quickly left the office, his eyes blazing with fury. On his way back, he made a decision. This was the time to stand up and confront the truth. Not just to protect himself, but to protect the truth itself. 2 days later, a special press conference was held right outside Washington National Airport, drawing massive media attention nationwide. Before a crowd of cameras and microphones, Victor Grant appeared in his old Air Force uniform, standing tall, full of pride and determination. "Good afternoon. I am Victor Grant, a retired Air Force officer and the airport security chief recently suspended without cause by Regalis Airways. I am here today to tell the truth about what is going on inside this airline." Victor took a deep breath and continued strongly. "CEO Charles Whitmore and the senior leadership of Regalis Airways have deliberately placed all the blame on me. But I stand here before you to declare I will not accept being a scapegoat. I have spent my life protecting honor and truth. It is Charles Whitmore and his associates who are behind the entire corruption scandal, the fake maintenance records, and the racial discrimination within this company." Victor's firm and resolute statement immediately sent shockwaves through the public. Reporters quickly began firing questions, and Victor didn't hesitate to provide even more clear evidence. At the same time, live broadcasts of the press conference aired across the country. Natalie and Leah watched every word from Victor with satisfaction and deep respect. Leah smiled faintly and said to Natalie, "Victor is a man of rare self-respect. He's making a much more powerful counterattack than we ever hoped for." Natalie nodded, her eyes shining with belief. Victor's courage will be the final blow to the heart of Regalis Airways and Charles Whitmore. They picked the wrong person to challenge. Meanwhile, in Regalis Airways' CEO office, Charles Whitmore watched the TV screen in panic. All his plans had turned to dust. His hands shook as he collapsed completely under Victor Grant's powerful accusations. The battle that seemed easy had now become the worst nightmare of Charles's life. He now knew better than anyone that he had completely lost control, and the truth, the very thing he thought could remain hidden forever, had returned with relentless force, demanding justice. After Victor Grant's powerful accusations before the media, the atmosphere at Regalis Airways headquarters became tenser than ever. Charles Whitmore had nowhere left to run, but he still clung to a faint hope, believing that the powerful connections and vast wealth he had concealed for years would be enough to save him from this spiraling disaster. But Charles was wrong. That morning, as the CEO's office still hung heavy with tension, a special FBI task force suddenly appeared at the door. The sound of swift footsteps, stern faces, and jackets, clearly marked with the word FBI, froze every employee at Regalis in their tracks, unable to believe what they were witnessing. FBI Special Agent William Harper quickly entered Charles' office, flinging the door open without warning. Charles Whitmore sprang out of his chair, his face drained of color, trembling as he spoke. "What? What is this? You can't barge in here like this." Special Agent Harper coldly pulled a search warrant from his jacket pocket. "Charles Whitmore, this is a search and seizure warrant for your arrest on charges of money laundering, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. You are to come with us immediately." Charles' face went pale, and he staggered back, desperately looking for help. But no one dared to speak up in his defense anymore. Every loyal associate turned away, avoiding his gaze as if they had never known him. In just minutes, the image of Charles Whitmore, once considered a titan of the airline industry, being escorted out of his office in handcuffs, spread like wildfire on social media and live news channels. The public was stunned as they witnessed the former powerful CEO, head bowed in defeat, stepping into the black FBI car, the flashbulbs of hundreds of reporters lighting up the scene. Meanwhile, at Cole Dynamics headquarters, Natalie Cole and Leah Jackson closely monitored every development. Natalie took a deep breath, her expression calm but unwavering. "It's time, Leah. We need to deliver the final blow to make sure Charles and the entire leadership of Regalis Airways have no chance of recovery." Leah nodded, understanding. "I'm fully prepared. All the evidence on the money laundering transactions, the contact emails, and the most damning proof of Charles Whitmore and his associates hiding illegal financial flows is ready. Once you give the order, we'll release everything to the media immediately." Natalie didn't hesitate, speaking firmly. "Do it now, Leah. This is the moment when justice must speak loud and clear." Less than an hour later, the entire nation was shaken once again as all the evidence of Charles Whitmore and Regalis Airways' international money laundering schemes was publicly revealed. Special news reports flooded television, newspapers, and social media. Shock in America, Charles Whitmore exposed in billion-dollar international money laundering network. Regalis Airways crumbles as money laundering and fraud files are uncovered. Every detail of the illegal transactions, suspicious money transfers through foreign accounts, and especially the direct involvement of Charles and his senior leadership were exposed clearly to the public. Confidential documents with Regalis Airways seals, Charles Whitmore's personal signature, and the names of his loyal associates appeared in full, landing a final blow to the company's reputation. In the FBI interrogation room, Charles Whitmore sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the files Special Agent Harper had just placed before him. He felt his entire world collapsing around him. "We have enough evidence to put you away for decades, Charles," Special Agent Harper said coldly. "But if you cooperate and tell us who else is involved, the court may consider reducing your sentence." Charles looked up, his eyes filled with desperation, his lips trembling as he weakly protested. "It's all a misunderstanding. I didn't know anything. You can't do this." Harper merely smiled gently, his voice unwavering. "Charles, the game is over. You've been betrayed by your own people. You have no way out now." At Cole Dynamics, Natalie stood by the window, gazing at the vast horizon. Leah walked over to her, speaking softly. "Charles Whitmore has completely fallen, Natalie. Regalis Airways won't recover from this shock." Natalie nodded gently, her voice soft but filled with strength. "This fight was never about me, Leah. I just want the business world to understand that no one can forever ignore justice and truth. The innocent people who've suffered injustice must have their honor restored." The evening light slowly faded toward the horizon, but for the first time in a long time, Natalie felt the warmth of a new dawn approaching. Justice had arrived, The truth was protected, and now she knew that the hardest battle of her life had reached its glorious end. After Victor Grant's powerful accusations before the media, the atmosphere at Regalis Airways headquarters became more tense than ever. Charles Whitmore had nowhere left to hide, but he still clung to a final hope, believing that the powerful connections and enormous sums of money he had carefully concealed for years would be enough to save him from this whirlwind. But Charles was wrong. That morning, as the CEO's office still hung in the heavy air of uncertainty, an FBI task force suddenly appeared at the door. The sound of hurried footsteps, stern faces, and jackets clearly marked with the word FBI left all Regalis staff in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were witnessing. Special Agent William Harper quickly entered Charles' office, flinging the door open without warning. Charles Whitmore jumped up from his chair, his face drained of color, trembling as he spoke. "What? What is this? You can't just barge in here like this." Special Agent Harper coldly pulled a search warrant from his jacket pocket. "Charles Whitmore, this is a search and seizure warrant for your arrest on charges of money laundering, financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. You are to come with us immediately." Charles' face went pale, and he staggered back, desperately searching for help. But no one dared to speak up for him anymore. Every loyal associate turned away, avoiding his gaze as though they had never known him. In just minutes, the image of Charles Whitmore, once considered a titan of the airline industry, being escorted out of his office in handcuffs, spread like wildfire on social media and live news channels. The public was stunned as they witnessed the former powerful CEO, head bowed in defeat, stepping into the black FBI car, the flashbulbs of hundreds of reporters lighting up the scene. Meanwhile, at Cole Dynamics headquarters, Natalie Cole and Leah Jackson closely monitored every development. Natalie took a deep breath, her expression calm but unwavering. "It's time, Leah. We need to deliver the final blow to make sure Charles and the entire leadership of Regalis Airways have no chance of recovery." Leah nodded, understanding. "I'm fully prepared." All the evidence on the money laundering transactions, the contact emails, and the most damning proof of Charles Whitmore and his associates hiding illegal financial flows is ready. Once you give the order, we'll release everything to the media immediately. Natalie didn't hesitate, speaking firmly. "Do it now, Leah. This is the moment when justice must speak loud and clear." Less than an hour later, the entire nation was shaken once again, as all the evidence of Charles Whitmore and Regalis Airways' international money laundering schemes was publicly revealed. Special news reports flooded television, newspapers, and social media. Shock in America, Charles Whitmore exposed in billion-dollar international money laundering network. Regalis Airways crumbles as money laundering and fraud files are uncovered. Every detail of the illegal transactions, suspicious money transfers through foreign accounts, and especially the direct involvement of Charles and his senior leadership were exposed clearly to the public. Confidential documents with Regalis Airways seals, Charles Whitmore's personal signature, and the names of his loyal associates appeared in full, landing a final blow to the company's reputation. In the FBI interrogation room, Charles Whitmore sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the files Special Agent Harper had just placed before him. He felt his entire world collapsing around him. "We have enough evidence to put you away for decades, Charles," Special Agent Harper said coldly, "but if you cooperate and tell us who else is involved, the court may consider reducing your sentence." Charles looked up, his eyes filled with desperation, his lips trembling as he weakly protested. "It's all a misunderstanding. I didn't know anything. You can't do this." Harper merely smiled gently, his voice unwavering. "Charles, the game is over. You've been betrayed by your own people. You have no way out now." At Cole Dynamics, Natalie stood by the window, gazing at the vast horizon. Leah walked over to her, speaking softly. "Charles Whitmore has completely fallen, Natalie. Regalis Airways won't recover from this shock." Natalie nodded gently, her voice soft but filled with strength. "This fight was never about me, Leah. I just want the business world to understand that no one can forever ignore justice and truth. The innocent people who've suffered injustice must have their honor restored." The evening light slowly faded toward the horizon, but for the first time in a long time, Natalie felt the warmth of a new dawn approaching. Justice had arrived, the truth was protected, and now she knew that the hardest battle of her life had reached its glorious end. Meanwhile, in the FBI office, Charles Whitmore sat alone, his eyes blank as he watched TV coverage of Regalis Airways being taken over by Natalie Cole. He trembled as he realized that the power empire he had once built with greed and injustice had completely collapsed. The most painful part for Charles was seeing the company he had once dominated now in the hands of the very woman he had once belittled and tried to humiliate. But Charles understood that he had no other choice but to accept this bitter defeat. Outside the interrogation room, Special Agent Harper closed the file, looking at Charles with a cold gaze, shaking his head slightly. "Charles, the game is truly over. Natalie Cole has won, and this time, it's true justice." As the acquisition of Regalis Airways was completed, Natalie Cole knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey ahead. On a radiant spring morning, she stood before the newly renamed headquarters, a powerful symbol of the complete transformation she sought to bring. Regalis Airways had now become Cole Air, a completely new brand representing the ideals of fairness, transparency, and opportunity for all. The launch event of the new brand attracted thousands of people and media outlets. The morning sunlight illuminated the large sign with the meaningful slogan Natalie had chosen, "Where everyone belongs," a clear and powerful statement of her commitment to society and the community. Before the multitude of cameras and microphones, Natalie took the stage, her voice deep, confident, and sincere. "We are here today not just to launch a new airline. Cole Air represents the core values I have always pursued throughout my life: fairness, respect, and diversity. I want everyone, no matter their background, skin color, or social class, to feel welcomed, respected, and most importantly, like they truly belong when they step onto our planes." The crowd erupted in emotional applause. Natalie smiled gently, her eyes filled with determination as she continued. "But to fulfill this great commitment, I know that Cole Air needs a talented, honest, and steadfast leader, someone who has stood firm against injustice and fought quietly from within Regalis for many years. Therefore, today, I am honored to announce the appointment of Mrs. Helen Foster as the new CEO of Cole Air." Amidst the enthusiastic applause, Helen Foster slowly walked to the stage, her eyes filled with emotion and gratitude. For years she had quietly endured the oppression and disdain from Charles Whitmore, simply for speaking out to defend what was right. Now, she stood in a place that once seemed impossible, the highest leadership position of the airline. Helen looked at Natalie, her eyes full of admiration and respect. "I am deeply honored to have been entrusted with this responsibility by Natalie Cole and the board of directors. I promise everyone here today, from now on, Cole Air will not just be an airline. It will be a symbol of equality and opportunity, where the mistakes of the past will never be repeated." Meanwhile, just outside the stage, Leah Jackson stood next to Victor Grant, both silently smiling. feeling an indescribable joy and pride as they witnessed the birth of a new symbol, a symbol of justice and hope. Victor turned to Leah, his voice calm but full of emotion. "I lost all faith when I was betrayed by those I trusted, but seeing Cole Air come to life today, I know that everything we went through was worth it." Leah gently placed her hand on Victor's shoulder, softly replying, "Victor, people like you are the reason Natalie fought this battle to the end. Cole Air is not just a symbol, but a reminder to all of us that justice will always prevail if we never give up hope." At the same time, in the holding cell, Charles Whitmore sat huddled on the hard chair, his blank eyes fixed on the small screen in the room, showing live coverage of the Cole Air launch. He trembled as he watched the company he once built not only change hands, but completely transform in essence, a change that filled him with bitterness and shame like never before. As the image of Helen Foster standing beside Natalie appeared on the screen, Charles clenched his fists, his face turning pale with anger and humiliation. Helen, the woman he had always belittled and oppressed, was now entrusted with the highest power, the very leadership of the company he had once dominated. For Charles, this was the harshest punishment, a bitter lesson about the consequences of arrogance and injustice. Outside the holding room, Special Agent Harper stepped in, looking at Charles for a long while before speaking gently. "Charles, as you can see, life has its way of returning fairness. What Natalie Cole is doing with Cole Air will be a lesson for many, yourself included." Charles lowered his head in silence, no longer possessing the strength to resist. He understood, more than anyone, that now, not only had his company been lost, but his entire reputation and career had been forever buried under the new symbol of justice that was Cole Air. As the ceremony ended, Natalie stood silently looking up at the vast blue sky. Helen walked up to her, her voice soft and filled with gratitude. "Natalie, I don't know how to thank you enough. You've given me this opportunity, an opportunity I never thought I could achieve." Natalie turned to Helen, smiling faintly, her eyes filled with trust. "Helen, it's your integrity and courage that brought you here. I'm simply the one standing behind, helping the world see that." The two women stood side by side, looking toward the future ahead, a bright future they had fought together to build. For them, Cole Air was not just a company, but a living declaration that justice and truth always prevail, no matter the challenges and obstacles faced along the way. After the successful launch of Cole Air, Natalie Cole knew that this victory was not solely hers. It was the result of the courage, persistence, and efforts of all those who had dared to stand up against injustice. It was time for Natalie to personally honor those unsung heroes who had risked their careers and lives to fight for what was right. One of Natalie's first decisions after Cole Air's operations began was to invite Jamal Barnes to the CEO's office. When Jamal walked into the spacious room, his heart raced, unable to hide the emotion and nervousness. Natalie stood up and walked toward him with a sincere smile. "Jamal, you were one of the first to bravely speak up for me during my most difficult times. You showed me that there are still young people who dare to confront injustice. Because of that, I want to personally offer you a place in Cole Air's Senior Leadership Training Program. Will you help me build a better future?" Jamal was speechless, his eyes shining with joy and pride. He nodded firmly, his voice trembling with gratitude. "Ms. Natalie, this is truly an immense honor. I promise I won't disappoint you. I will dedicate myself to the ideals of Cole Air." Natalie smiled with satisfaction, gently placing her hand on Jamal's shoulder, her eyes full of trust. I've always known you could do this, Jamal. Cole Air's future needs leaders like you. Not long after, Natalie called in Erica Mitchell, the brave woman who had exposed Karen McCarthy's racist actions. Erica walked nervously into the office, still feeling the fear from the pressures she had faced. But the moment she saw Natalie's warm smile and the sincerity in her eyes, Erica felt at peace. Erica, Natalie spoke softly, what you did wasn't just about exposing the wrongdoings of one individual. You spoke for thousands who had endured injustice, showing the world what true courage looks like. Because of that, I want to offer you the position of Head of Customer Ethics, an important role to ensure that incidents like this never happen again at Cole Air. Erica was stunned. She had never imagined that her small act would lead to such a significant change. Erica responded, choked up, I'm so grateful to you, Natalie. I promise I will do everything in my power to protect the values that Cole Air stands for. Natalie nodded gently, her eyes full of belief in the young woman before her. I trust you, Erica, and I know that Cole Air will be much safer with you here. Meanwhile, in the airport security office, Victor Grant was packing his personal belongings, still feeling the bitterness from the false accusations made by Charles Whitmore. But at that moment, the office door suddenly opened, and Natalie Cole walked in with Leah Jackson, holding an official appointment letter. Victor stood up in surprise, and Natalie approached him, her voice sincere and full of respect. Victor, I know what you've gone through hasn't been easy. Charles Whitmore tried to destroy your honor, but you stood up, proudly fighting to protect the truth and justice. Because of this, I want you to become the Chief Security Officer of Cole Air. I believe no one is more suited for this position than you, a decorated officer and a responsible leader. Victor stood still for a few seconds, emotions swelling in his chest. Finally, he calmly responded with unwavering pride. Miss Natalie, I accept this honor with deep gratitude. I promise you, Leah, and everyone here that the security and safety of Cole Air will always be my top priority. I will never betray the trust you've placed in me. In another part of the building, in the small interrogation room, Charles Whitmore sat huddled in his prison uniform, his hollow eyes staring into the void in front of him. The news on the small screen about the appointments and promotions of Jamal Barnes, Erica Mitchell, and Victor Grant cut deep into his heart. Charles bitterly realized that he had underestimated the power of truth and courage. Special Agent Harper saw the painful look in Charles's eyes and spoke softly. Charles, this is what Natalie Cole has been trying to tell you for a long time. Justice doesn't lie in the hands of the powerful, but in the hearts of those who dare to protect it. Charles said nothing, lowering his head in silence. He understood more than anyone that the price to pay for arrogance and greed was the loss of everything: status, power, and honor. That afternoon, Natalie walked slowly through the new Cole Air offices, her heart full of emotion as she reflected on the journey so far. Leah walked up to her, gently speaking. Natalie, the decisions made today will help Cole Air become a true symbol of justice. You've given the most deserving people a chance. Natalie turned to Leah, smiling faintly. No, Leah. It's they who gave me the opportunity to do what's right. I'm simply the one who knows how to appreciate and repay that courage. In the distance, the evening sun set gently, but for the first time in many long years of struggle, Natalie knew that the light of justice had truly illuminated the path ahead. After the heroic acts of people like Jamal Barnes, Erica Mitchell, and Victor Grant were finally recognized, those who had once used their power to cause suffering were forced to face the rightful consequences. This is the inevitable law of life, where justice always finds its way back to those who have deliberately ignored it. In the federal courtroom, Charles Whitmore sat quietly, his tired eyes staring blankly at the empty space in front of him. Today's trial was no longer the intense legal battle he had once hoped for, but merely the final sentencing of a life that had lost everything. The judge's stern voice echoed through the courtroom. Given the clear evidence of financial fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice, the court sentences Charles Whitmore to 15 years in federal prison. However, considering that the defendant has cooperated in providing full disclosure of his crimes and those involved, the sentence will be reduced to 7 years. The gavel struck, and Charles lowered his head to accept the bitter fate he had set in motion himself. As the police escorted him out of the courtroom, Charles glanced at the crowd, but he saw no familiar faces, no allies, no one to lean on. He realized that he had lost everything because of his greed and arrogance. At the same time, in another smaller courtroom, Karen McCarthy stood trembling before the final verdict in her lawsuit against Regalis Airways. Her last hope for a legal victory was shattered completely when the judge clearly declared, "The court finds that Mrs. Karen McCarthy engaged in severe racist actions while employed at Regalis Airways. The claims against the company are baseless. Her lawsuit is dismissed entirely." Karen felt as though someone had struck her pride. Her face went pale with disappointment and shame. As she left the courthouse, a flurry of cameras and reporters immediately surrounded her, the flashing lights like a curse that would haunt her for the rest of her life. From now on, Karen knew her life would only be marked by disgrace and ruin. Returning to a brighter light, in the poor neighborhood of Chicago, where Natalie had grown up amidst poverty and injustice, today was filled with joy and hope like never before. Natalie stood before her old school, surrounded by hundreds of students, parents, and teachers. The sky seemed clearer today as she made the most important announcement of her life before her hometown community. Today, I return not only to revisit the memories of my childhood, but also to share with you a brighter future. I am proud to announce the establishment of the Cole Dynamics Foundation, with a grant of $50 million, dedicated to education and technological development, with a special focus on children from disadvantaged backgrounds right here. Natalie's announcement caused the entire neighborhood to erupt in applause and cheers. The faces of children lit up with joy, and the eyes of parents and teachers were filled with emotion, making Natalie feel deeply the true value of everything she had fought for. "I want all of you to understand," Natalie continued emotionally, her voice filled with sincerity. "None of you should ever suffer injustice just because you were born into difficult circumstances. I was once a poor child from Chicago, and now I stand here not because I'm any more special than anyone else, but because I dared to believe in the power of knowledge and courage. Remember, each one of you can do the same." In the distance, Leah Jackson stood next to Helen Foster, Erica Mitchell, and Victor Grant, all silently smiling with pride as they watched Natalie. Victor quietly said to Leah, "We've truly created a miracle, Leah. Justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing and hope." Leah nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes, Victor." Natalie turned her own suffering into the strength to change the fate of thousands. She is living proof that justice truly exists. Meanwhile, in the small jail cell, Charles Whitmore sat silently, his empty eyes staring into the vastness before him, thinking about all the wrong decisions that had led him here. When he saw Natalie Cole announce the charity fund on TV for the first time in his life, Charles felt a deep sense of regret creeping into his mind. He whispered bitterly, "Maybe if I had stopped earlier, maybe..." But now it was too late for regret. Charles knew that time in prison would be his only opportunity to face himself, and perhaps that was the only way to atone for the unforgivable mistakes he had made. That evening, Natalie sat alone on the rooftop, gazing at the twinkling lights of Chicago below. Her heart was full of emotion as she reflected on the journey she had taken, a long and challenging journey, but one that had brought her back to herself and her roots. She looked up at the vast sky, a faint smile crossing her face. Mom and Dad, I've finally done it. I didn't let injustice win. From today, no child will have to grow up in the darkness of despair again. And as the first star sparkled in the sky, Natalie knew that she had fulfilled the greatest mission of her life, bringing justice, faith, and real hope to everyone. In the end, Natalie Cole's dramatic journey was not just a story of revenge or personal victory, but a powerful affirmation of justice, courage, and the strength of belief. Natalie proved that no matter who you are or where you come from, you can rise against injustice and change the world in your own way. And what about you? If you were faced with similar injustice, would you have the courage to stand up and fight? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story truly moved you, don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on more exciting stories ahead. Thank you for listening and for being with us.